We live in a world where everyone has an opinion, but very few have original thoughts. Most people are not living their own lives. They're living a script written by someone else. They think they're making choices, but in reality, they're just following patterns they never questioned. The truth is, the world doesn't reward those who simply go along. It rewards those who can see beyond the noise, those who can separate truth from illusion, those who dare to think when everyone else is blindly reacting. Critical thinking isn't just an academic skill. It's the ultimate survival tool in a world designed to distract, mislead, and control you. And if you stay with me until the very last word of this speech, you'll walk away with a sharper mind, unshakable clarity, and the ability to make decisions that will completely transform your life. Most people live their entire lives believing they are in control of their thoughts. Yet if you look closely, you'll see that most thoughts people have are not original. They're recycled. They're inherited. They're absorbed from the environment without question. From the moment we're born, we're surrounded by voices telling us how to think, what to believe, what's right, what's wrong, what's possible and what's not. We learn to repeat those ideas as if we carry them into adulthood without ever putting them under a microscope to see if they actually make sense or serve us. This is why so many people feel trapped without even knowing why. They are living inside a mental prison, but because the walls are invisible, they can't see they're confined. And the most dangerous prisons are always the ones you don't realize you're in. Think about how most of your decisions are made. You choose a career because it's safe or respectable, not because you asked yourself if it would fulfill you. You hold certain opinions about politics, religion, relationships, success, not because you've researched, tested, and challenged those ideas, but because you absorbed them from your family, your culture, or the circle of friends you happen to grow up with. And because it feels normal, you never stop to question if normal is actually right for you. Comfort in thought is a trap. Just because a belief feels familiar doesn't mean critical thinking begins the moment you stop running on autopilot. It's the moment you pause before accepting a piece of information and ask, who told me this? Where did it come from? Why should I believe it? Most people never reach that point because questioning is uncomfortable. If you question a belief that's been with you for years, it forces you to admit you might have been wrong. And for the ego, that's terrifying. It's much easier to keep going along with the script you've been given than to face the possibility that the foundation of your thinking might be crabs. But here's the truth, you cannot build a strong life on a weak foundation. If the roots of your thinking are shallow, your decisions will be weak and your results will be unstable. Look at the way society operates. Schools teach you to memorize, not to analyze. Work environments reward those who follow instructions, not those who challenge them. Social media pushes quick, emotional takes, not deep, reasoned discussions. Everything around you is designed to keep you moving fast, feeling reactive, and consuming information without questioning it. Because the faster you consume, the less you reflect. And the less you reflect, the easier you are to influence. If you've ever found yourself agreeing with something you haven't fact-checked, or feeling strongly about an issue you've barely studied, you've been caught in that trap. And if you don't consciously break out of it, you'll spend your life being shaped by forces you don't even see. The human brain has a default mode. It prefers the path of least resistance. Thinking deeply takes energy. It requires focus. It forces you to slow down and evaluate every assumption. And most people simply aren't willing to do that because it feels like work. But think about what's at stake. Every major decision in your life, where you live, who you marry, how you spend your money, how you raise your children, will be influenced by the quality of your thinking. If your thinking is shallow, emotional, or borrowed from others, you are gambling with your future. But if your thinking is clear, independent, and based on evidence, you give yourself the best chance at building a life that truly belongs to you. When you begin to think deeply, you start to notice how much of what you've been told is incomplete or misleading. You realize that just because something is common doesn't mean it's correct. Just because a belief has been passed down for generations doesn't make it immune to being wrong. Throughout history, the greatest advancements in human progress came from people who questioned what everyone else accepted. People once believed the earth was flat because they trusted the authorities of their time. It took critical thinkers, people willing to be ridiculed, attacked, and ignored, to prove otherwise. Every breakthrough in science, technology, human rights, and personal growth comes from someone daring to think differently. Deep thinking is not about being negative or suspicious of everything. It's about refusing to accept things blindly. It's about demanding clarity before commitment. It's about asking the questions that others are too afraid to ask. You might be wondering, but what if I start questioning everything and I lose my certainty? That's exactly the point. Losing false certainty is the first step toward gaining true understanding. A mind that's never been shaken will never grow strong. It's the fiction of opposing ideas, the discomfort of challenging your own assumptions, that sharpens your reasoning like a blade. Every time you catch yourself agreeing with something instantly, pause and examine it. Why do you agree? Is it because it aligns with your own reasoned judgment, or because it's what you've always believed? If it's the second, you have work to do. If your goal is to grow, you must be willing to burn away the mental clutter you've inherited. You can respect your upbringing, your culture, your traditions, but you must test them against reality. Keep what's true. Discard what's false. Modify what's incomplete. That's how you build a mind that works for you, not against you. And yes, this process is You might discover that you've built parts of your identity around ideas that don't hold up under scrutiny. You might realize that certain people in your life will resist or resent your new way of thinking because it threatens their comfort. This is where you must decide what matters more, fitting in or thinking for yourself. Most people choose fitting in. They'll silence their own doubts to keep the peace. But if you want to rise above the average, you have to value truth over comfort. You have to be willing to stand alone in your reasoning until the evidence brings others around, if it ever does. Thinking deeply doesn't mean overthinking. It doesn't mean you get stuck in endless analysis and never act. It means you take the time to examine the foundations before you build on them. Imagine trying to construct a skyscraper without checking if the ground beneath it is stable. That's what most people do with their lives. They start stacking goals, relationships, and decisions on top of untested assumptions, and then they wonder why everything collapses when pressure comes. The collapse isn't bad luck. It's the result of shallow thinking at the start. You have to be ruthless with your own thoughts. Every belief you hold should be able to withstand pressure. If it can't, it's not worth keeping, and you don't get there by hoping it's true. You get there by testing it against reality. Reality doesn't bend to belief. It doesn't care about feelings, traditions, or opinions. It is what it is. And the more your thinking is aligned with reality, the more effective you will be in every area of life. This is where the real growth happens. When you stop outsourcing your thinking, you stop being at the mercy of trends, propaganda, and groupthink. You start making decisions by land and long-term vision instead of impulse or peer pressure. You begin to trust yourself because you know your conclusions come from a process of deliberate thought, not blind acceptance. And once you can trust your own mind, you become unshakable. The wake-up call is realizing that most people are just reacting to life. They're not living it intentionally. They hear something, they feel something, and they respond without ever asking if it's the right response. They take in opinions and repeat them as truth. They see a crowd moving in a direction and assume it must be the right way. And in doing so, they give away the most valuable thing they have: their ability to choose their own path. If you want to change your life, you have to change the way you think. And if you want to change the way you think, you have to start by slowing down and questioning everything. Not out of paranoia, but out of the desire to live in alignment with truth. Because when you see things clearly, you stop being a follower and start becoming a leader of your mind, your actions, and your destiny. Most people wake up every day believing they are thinking for themselves. Most of their thoughts are borrowed. They are echoes of what they have heard from parents, teachers, friends, media, and social networks. They are not original, they are inherited. And the dangerous thing is that because these ideas feel familiar, they are rarely questioned. That is how a person can go years, even decades, living by a set of beliefs that were never truly their own. It is not that people are incapable of thinking deeply. It is that deep thinking requires effort, and effort is something the human mind naturally resists. The brain seeks shortcuts, comfort, and familiar paths because those feel safe. But safe thinking is rarely accurate thinking, and comfortable beliefs are often the ones holding you back. If you pause for a moment and examine the way you make decisions, you might realize something unsettling. You choose a career not necessarily because it is what excites you, but because you were told it was respectable or stable. You follow certain traditions not because you've tested their value, but because they were handed to you. You might even hold strong political or social views that you've never truly dissected. This is how the cycle continues. You are given a script for life before you even realize you have the option to write your own. And if you never stop to examine it, you will perform that script from beginning to end without ever asking whether it suits you. Critical thinking begins the moment you recognize that you have been running on autopilot. It is the moment you stop taking information at face value and start asking questions. It is when you start noticing the gap between what you hear and what is actually true. The moment you begin to think for yourself, you become a threat to the systems that profit from your blind obedience. You become harder to manipulate, harder to mislead, harder to control, and this is why so few people truly embrace critical thinking. It comes with responsibility. Once you see the truth, you can no longer hide behind ignorance. The reason most people do not think deeply is that questioning old beliefs can be uncomfortable. It forces you to face the possibility that you have, not just once, but for years. And for the ego, that is a hard thing to accept. It is far easier to protect your pride than to confront your illusions, but growth has never come from comfort. Progress, both personal and societal, has always come from discomfort, from someone daring to say, "What if everything we've been told is wrong?" That question has been the beginning of every major leap forward in human history. Look at the way the world is structured today. We live in a time of constant distraction. The news is designed to trigger emotions before facts. Social media rewards those who speak quickly, not those who think carefully. Schools, for the most part, focus on teaching you what to think, not how to think. Workplaces often punish those who challenge the system, rewarding those who follow it without question. Every environment around you subtly pushes you toward shallow thinking because shallow thinking is predictable. And predictable people are easier to influence. You might think you are immune to this, but ask yourself, how many times have you repeated something you read online without verifying it? How many times have you agreed with an opinion simply because it came from someone you like or respect? How many times have you avoided asking hard questions because you didn't want to face the answers? If you are honest with yourself, you will see that these moments happen more often than you realized. And this is not to shame you. It is to make you aware, because awareness is the first step to breaking the cycle. Deep thinking is not about being negative or distrusting everything. It is about making sure that the beliefs you live by are built on a foundation of truth, not assumption. It is about slowing down before you accept something and asking, is this real? Is this proven? Is this serving me? This is not easy because it requires you to be willing to let go of what is false, even if it has been a part of your identity. But the moment you begin to think like this, you start building a mind that is your own. When you strip away the noise, you realize that many of the ideas that shape people's lives are not based on evidence but on repetition. Something is repeated enough times by enough people, and it becomes common sense. But common sense is not always common truth. History proves this. There was a time when people believed disease was caused by evil spirits. There was a time when slavery was seen as natural. There was a time when women were considered intellectually inferior. These were not fringe beliefs. They were widely accepted truths of their era, and the only reason they changed was because someone dared to think deeper than the rest, to challenge what everyone else accepted without proof. This is the same challenge you face in your personal life. You might believe you cannot succeed in a certain area because people like you don't do those things. You might think you are too young, too old, too uneducated, too unlucky. But where did those beliefs come from? Were they proven by your own effort, or did you absorb them from someone else's failures? This is why deep thinking is so powerful. It doesn't just change what you believe. It changes you up. The act of questioning forces you to slow down, to analyze, to pull apart an idea piece by piece and see what it's made of. You start to notice patterns, where information comes from, who benefits from you believing it, what emotions are being used to make you accept it. You begin to realize that truth does not fear questions, but lies do. A truth will stand up to examination, but a lie will collapse when pressed. That is why the world tries to rush you past questioning. It doesn't want you to have the time to separate reality from illusion. When you start thinking deeply, you also start seeing through the mask of the crowd. Groupthink is seductive because it feels safe. If everyone around you believes something, it must be true, right? But the crowd has been wrong throughout history more times than it has been right. And when you live by the crowd's thinking, you live the crowd's life, which means you also inherit the crowd's limitations. To rise above, you have to be willing to be the one who steps out line, the one who asks why when everyone else is nodding along. This will not make you popular. People are uncomfortable around those who question too much because it forces them to confront their own unexamined beliefs. But you are not here to be universally liked. You are here to be mentally free. And freedom requires that you value truth more than approval. When you can do that, you start to build a kind of confidence that cannot be shaken by opinion. You stop seeking validation from others because you know the value of your conclusions comes from the process you use to reach them, not from how many people agree with you. Deep thinking also protects you from manipulation. Advertisers, politicians, influencers, they all rely on the fact that most people do not think beyond the surface. They speak to emotion before reason, knowing that if they can trigger a feeling, they can bypass critical analysis. They use fear, urgency, and repetition to push ideas into your mind before you have time to evaluate them. But when you have trained yourself to think critically, you see the hooks they are trying to set in your mind, and you can choose not to bite. This is the wake-up call. If you continue living without, you will not be living your life. You will be living the life others have designed for you. And the worst part is, you will not even know it. You will think you are making choices, but those choices will be confined to the options you were given, the beliefs you were handed, the boundaries you never thought to challenge. To live a life that is truly yours, you must be willing to think thoughts that are truly yours. The moment you take ownership of your thinking, the quality of your life begins to change. You stop making decisions just to fit in. You stop chasing things you don't actually want. You stop wasting years on paths that don't lead where you thought they would. Instead, you start moving with clarity. You know why you are doing what you are doing, and that knowledge gives you power. And when you have power over your mind, no one else can control your life. From the moment we are born, we are surrounded by answers. Parents answer our cries, teachers answer our questions, society answers our uncertainties before we even have the chance to explore them. By the time we chance to explore them, we are so accustomed to receiving ready-made answers that we forget the deeper skill, the art of asking the right questions. And yet, it is the questions you ask, not the answers you collect, that determine the quality of your understanding and the depth of your wisdom. Asking the right question has the power to open doors you never knew existed, to reveal truths that the world hides in plain sight. Questioning is not about cynicism or distrust. It is not about assuming everyone is lying to you. It is about realizing that every piece of information you encounter carries a context, a perspective, and often a motive. By asking, "Why am I being told this? Who benefits if I believe it? What evidence supports it?" You shift from being a passive receiver of information to an active investigator of truth. That shift changes everything. You stop being a consumer of ideas and become a creator of understanding. Most people hesitate to question because they were taught, directly or indirectly, that questioning authority is disrespectful, that doubting tradition is dangerous, that too many questions make you difficult to deal with. But history shows the opposite. Progress has always been made by those who were difficult. The innovators, the reformers, the revolutionaries, they all shared the same habit of asking questions that made others uncomfortable. They refused to accept the world as it was handed to them. They did not blindly accept the first answer. They kept digging until they found one that made sense. The mind that never questions is like a locked room with no windows. It may feel safe and orderly, but it is cut off from the fresh air of new ideas. The mind that questions is open, curious, alive. It allows light to enter, even if that light reveals things that are uncomfortable to see. Without questions, there is no growth. Without questions, there is only repetition of what has already been done, already thought, already believed. There is a reason powerful institutions fear critical questions. A single well-placed question can unravel years of propaganda, expose deep-seated corruption, or dismantle long-held myths. This is why so much of modern life is engineered to keep you distracted. Endless scrolling, constant entertainment, emotional outrage cycles. Because distraction is the enemy of deep questioning. When you are mentally scattered, you do not pause long enough to ask the kind of questions that could change your perspective forever. One of the most valuable skills you can develop is to slow down in moments where the world wants you to rush. When everyone else is reacting, pause. When everyone else is agreeing, ask yourself, is this the whole truth? That pause is where the question is born, and the question is where clarity begins. The greatest mistakes in history were not made because people had the wrong answers. They were made because people never stopped to ask the right questions in the first place. The art of questioning begins with curiosity. Curiosity is a hunger to understand, to see what lies beneath the surface. It is not satisfied with the first explanation. It wants to know the reasons, the causes, the connections. Curiosity is the force that drives a scientist to experiment, a philosopher to debate, an entrepreneur to innovate. Without curiosity, there is no reason to question, because you have accepted that what you know is all there is to know. But curiosity alone is not enough. You must also have the courage to follow your questions wherever they lead. The truth is not always convenient. Sometimes the answer you find will require you to change your beliefs, your habits, even your entire way of living. This is why so many people stop questioning when they get close to something uncomfortable. It feels safer to retreat into the familiar than to face the uncertainty of change. But safety has never built a great life, and comfort has never built a great mind. Every great advancement began with a question that challenged the accepted narrative. What if the earth is not the center of the universe? What if disease is not a punishment from the gods, but something that can be treated? What if slavery is not natural but a violation of human dignity? Each of these questions ridicule, even punishment. But in time, they led to revolutions in thought that changed the world. The same is true for your personal life. The questions you are afraid to ask are often the ones that hold the key to your greatest growth. Many people think questioning is simply asking, why, over and over. But the most effective questioning goes deeper. It asks not only why, but how do we know? It tests the reliability of sources, the validity of evidence, the consistency of logic. It distinguishes between opinion and fact, between assumption and proof. This is where many fail. They stop at, someone said so, and never move to, but how do we verify it? In an age where misinformation can spread across the world in seconds, the ability to verify is as important as the ability to ask. A person skilled in questioning can detect manipulation almost instantly. They recognize when language is being used to trigger emotion instead of reason. They notice when facts are being selectively presented to push a certain agenda. They understand that numbers can be framed to tell a specific story, that images can be chosen to evoke a certain reaction, that even silence on certain facts can shape perception. Once you learn to ask the right questions, you begin to see the fingerprints of influence everywhere. Questioning is also an act of self-awareness. It is not only about interrogating the outside world, but about interrogating your own mind. Why do I believe what I believe? Where did this belief come from? Has it been tested in my own experience? Does it serve me, or does it limit me? These are uncomfortable questions because they can reveal that some of your most cherished beliefs are built on shaky ground. But if your goal is truth, you must be willing to rebuild your mental foundation when you find cracks in it. When you ask better questions, you also make better decisions. Consider two people faced with the same opportunity. The first asks, will this make me more money? The second asks, will this align with my long-term goals, fit my values, and contribute to my growth? The second person's question is richer, more nuanced, and therefore more likely to lead to a decision that creates lasting fulfillment. The quality of your life is directly related to the quality of the questions you ask yourself every day. Many avoid questioning because they fear it will lead to doubt, and they equate doubt with weakness. But doubt, when used correctly, is not the enemy of truth. It is its ally. Doubt is the signal that something does not yet make sense, that more information is needed, that deeper understanding is required. The strongest beliefs are those that have survived the fire of doubt, tested from every angle, until nothing false remains. Without doubt, belief becomes blind faith, and blind faith is easy to exploit. Children are natural questioners. They ask why the sky is blue, why the grass grows, why people act the way they do. But over time, the world conditions them to stop asking so many questions. Because I said so becomes the answer. That's just how it is becomes the truth. And little by little, the habit of questioning fades. As adults, our task is to reclaim that childlike curiosity, but pair it with the maturity and discipline to investigate thoroughly. One of the most powerful ways to strengthen your questioning ability is to deliberately seek out perspectives different from your own. When you hear an idea you disagree with, resist the urge to dismiss it immediately. Instead, what if there is something in this I can learn? This does not mean you must accept every opposing view, but exploring them forces you to refine your thinking, to defend your conclusions with stronger evidence. It sharpens your mental blade. In a world where information is abundant, but attention is scarce, the art of questioning is your filter, your safeguard against mental clutter. It is the way you cut through noise to find signal, the way you separate what is relevant from. It allows you to focus your energy on what truly matters, instead of being pulled in every direction by every voice demanding your attention. The practice of questioning also breeds humility. The more you ask, the more you realize how much you do not know. This is not discouraging. It is empowering. It frees you from the illusion that you must have all the answers, and instead positions you as a lifelong learner. The most dangerous person is not the one who knows little, it is the one who knows little, but thinks they know enough. Questioning protects you from becoming that person. When you live with the habit of questioning, you become harder to deceive, harder to manipulate, harder to push into decisions you did not truly choose. You also become more creative, because questions are the birthplace of ideas. Every invention, every work of art, every breakthrough in science began with someone asking, "What if?" or "Why not?" That spark of curiosity, that refusal to accept things as they are, is the seed from which greatness grows. This is why the art of questioning everything is not a skill you practice occasionally. It is a way of life. It means you carry with you an ongoing dialogue between yourself and the world, a constant testing and refining of ideas. It means you live with your mind awake, your awareness sharp, your understanding ever deepening. We like to think of ourselves as rational beings, capable of weighing facts and making decisions based on clear logic. Yet beneath that belief lies an uncomfortable truth. Every one of us is influenced by hidden patterns in our thinking that distort our judgment. These patterns, known as cognitive biases, are not signs of stupidity. They are a byproduct of how the human brain evolved to survive. The problem is that the same mental shortcuts that once helped us escape predators and navigate a dangerous world can now lead us into false conclusions, flawed decisions, and self-imposed limitations. Recognizing these biases is not about shaming ourselves, it is about reclaiming control over our thinking. Imagine trying to navigate a city with a map that has invisible smudges and distortions. Without knowing where those flaws are, you might take the wrong turn, get lost, or end up somewhere entirely different from your intended destination. Cognitive biases are the invisible smudges on the map of your mind. You cannot erase them entirely. They are part of being human. But you can learn where they are, and once you see them, you can adjust your navigation. One of the most powerful biases shaping our perception is confirmation bias. The tendency to search for and remember information that confirms what we already believe. When you hold a belief, your brain becomes like a skilled lawyer, not a fair judge. It collects evidence to support your position, while ignoring or dismissing anything that challenges it. This is why two people can watch the same news story and come away with completely different interpretations. Their minds filtered the information through their existing beliefs, highlighting what agreed with them and erasing what did not fit. The danger of confirmation bias is that it creates a self-reinforcing loop. The more you believe something, the more you seek out evidence that supports it, and the less you expose yourself to anything that could change your mind. Over time, this loop can turn into a mental prison where you are certain you are right, but are actually trapped in a narrow tunnel of perspective. The only way to break free is to deliberately expose yourself to information and viewpoints that contradict your beliefs. Not to accept them blindly, but to weigh them honestly. This act is not weakness, it is intellectual bravery. Another subtle trap is the availability heuristic, the tendency to judge the likelihood of events based on how easily examples come to mind. If you hear about several plane crashes in a short period, you might start believing air travel is dangerous, even though statistically it remains far safer than driving. Your brain mistakes vividness for frequency, confusing what is memorable with what is likely. This bias explains why fears are often irrational, why media coverage can distort public perception, and why personal anecdotes can feel more convincing than scientific data. To counter it, you must train yourself to pause and ask, is this just vivid, or is it actually common? What do the numbers say? Then there is the anchoring bias, which happens when we rely too heavily on the first piece of information we encounter. The first number you hear in a negotiation, the first impression you form of a person, the first explanation you receive for an event, all of these can anchor your thinking, even if they are inaccurate. Retailers exploit this bias when they list a regular price next to a discounted price. Your mind fixates on the higher number as a reference point, making the discount seem more significant. Awareness of anchoring means refusing to take the first figure, idea, or assumption as unquestionable. It means seeking a second and third data point before forming your conclusion. The halo effect is another mental lens that distorts reality. If someone impresses you in one area, you are more likely to assume they excel in others. A charismatic speaker might be assumed to be intelligent about topics far beyond their expertise. A person who dresses well might be judged as more competent or trustworthy, even when there is no evidence for those traits. This bias works in reverse too. If someone disappoints you in one area, you may undervalue their abilities in others. Overcoming the halo effect requires separating traits from one another and judging each on its own merit, rather than letting one strong impression color everything else. Then there is survivorship bias, the mistake of focusing on the visible successes while ignoring the invisible failures. We look at famous entrepreneurs and think that taking massive risks is the secret to success, forgetting that for every vixiable billionaire there are thousands who took similar risks and failed without making headlines. Survivorship bias blinds us to the full picture, making dangerous strategies look like proven formulas. The antidote is to study not only those who succeeded, but also those who failed, and to understand the hidden variables that made the difference. Self-serving bias is another subtle trap. The tendency to attribute our successes to our own skill and our failures to external factors. When we win, we take full credit. When we lose, we blame bad luck, unfair circumstances, or the incompetence of others. This bias may protect our ego, but it robs us of growth. If every setback is someone else's fault, we never confront our own blind spots or mistakes. You must embrace the uncomfortable truth that you play a role in your failures just as you do in your successes. This mindset turns every loss into a lesson rather than a wound to hide. The Dunning-Kruger effect is perhaps one of the most humbling biases of all. It describes how people with low ability in a subject often overestimate their competence, while those with high ability underestimate theirs. In other words, the less you know, the more certain you are that you know enough. This bias is why beginners can sound overconfident and why experts often sound cautious. Awareness of the Dunning-Kruger effect means staying humble when you feel certain and pushing yourself to learn more, even when you think you already understand. It means valuing depth over certainty. Loss aversion is another powerful mental force. The tendency to fear losses more than we value gains. Studies show that losing 100 feels more painful than the joy of gaining 100. This bias can make us cling to bad investments, toxic relationships, or outdated ideas, simply because letting go feels like a loss, even if it would free us to pursue something. Overcoming loss aversion requires shifting your focus from what you are giving up to what you stand to gain. It requires seeing the act of letting go not as losing, but as creating space for something greater. These biases are not isolated quirks. They often interact, compounding each other's effects. Confirmation bias can amplify survivorship bias by making us notice only the successful extent our existing narrative. The availability heuristic can strengthen loss aversion by making rare negative events seem more likely than they are. Anchoring can work with the halo effect to make first impressions nearly impossible to shake. Once you understand how these biases overlap, you begin to see the complexity of your mental landscape and the importance of actively managing it. The most important step in overcoming cognitive biases is awareness. You cannot fight what you cannot see. This means regularly reflecting on your decisions and asking yourself, what might be influencing me without my awareness? Which mental shortcuts could be at play here? This is not an exercise in self-doubt, but in self-clarity. By identifying the patterns that skew your thinking, you begin to loosen their grip. The next step is to slow down your decision-making in situations that matter most. Biases thrive in speed. When you make quick judgments, you rely more heavily on instinct and mental shortcuts, which are fertile ground for bias. By slowing down, gathering more data, seeking multiple perspectives, and consciously challenging your first impressions, you weaken the power of these distortions. It is also valuable to create a system for testing your own thinking. Keep a decision journal, where you record your reasoning before major choices and revisit it later to see where your predictions were right or wrong. This process exposes patterns in your judgment that you might not notice in the moment. It can reveal, for example, that you consistently overestimate your ability to predict outcomes, or that you tend to ignore certain types of risks. Surrounding yourself with people who think differently is another powerful antidote to bias. If everyone in your circle sees the world the same way, your biases will go unchallenged. Seek out those who question you, who bring data you have not considered, who are not afraid to point out flaws in your reasoning. This is not always comfortable, but comfort is rarely where growth lives. Most importantly, overcoming biases is not about eliminating emotion from decision-making. Emotions are part of being human, and they often carry valuable information. The goal is not to be coldly rational, but to be aware of when emotion is steering you in a direction that does not align with reality. This is why combining emotional awareness with logical analysis creates the strongest form of judgment. When you commit to recognizing and managing cognitive biases, you are doing more than improving your decision-making. You are reclaiming mental sovereignty. You are refusing to let hidden forces steer your choices without your consent. You are stepping into a higher level of self-mastery where your mind becomes a tool you control, rather than a tool controlled by unseen patterns. We live much of our lives in invisible cages, not made of steel or locked doors, but built from the assumptions we carry in our minds. These assumptions are rarely questioned, because they feel like facts. They sit beneath the surface of our thinking, guiding our choices, shaping our beliefs, and determining our perception of reality without us ever noticing their influence. It is one of the most profound truths about human thought. What you accept without question becomes the foundation of everything you do, and if that foundation is flawed, everything you build upon it will lean, crack, or collapse. To understand the power of assumptions, imagine someone growing up in a small town where everyone believes that opportunities exist only in that town, that outsiders cannot be trusted, and that certain dreams are simply impossible. A person raised in that environment may never even consider moving to another city, starting a different kind of career, or meeting people beyond their circle, not because those things are truly impossible, but because their mind accepted the assumptions of those around them as truth. It is not just about what they believe. It is about what they never thought to question. The most dangerous assumptions are not the ones we know we hold, they are the ones we are unaware of. They are like tinted glasses we have worn for so long that we forget the world has any other color. This is why one of the most powerful acts of intellectual growth is to learn to identify and challenge those unseen lenses. It is not a comfortable process. Questioning your assumptions means pulling on the loose threads of your own mental sweater, and it can be unsettling to watch old patterns unravel. But the discomfort is a sign of progress, because growth often feels like chaos before it feels like clarity. One of the reasons assumptions are so persistent is that they are often inherited rather than chosen. As children, we absorb beliefs from our parents, teachers, culture, religion, media, and peers. We take these beliefs into adulthood, rarely pausing to examine whether they are still accurate or useful. We may hold assumptions about success, that it requires a certain degree, a certain amount of money, or a certain approval from others. We may hold assumptions about relationships, that they must look a certain way or follow a specific timeline. We may hold assumptions about ourselves, that we are not creative, not intelligent enough, not the kind of person who can take risks. These assumptions become self-fulfilling, not because they reflect reality, but because they dictate the actions we take and the possibilities we allow ourselves to see. The process of questioning assumptions begins with awareness. This requires slowing down enough to notice the moments when you respond automatically to a situation. When someone challenges your opinion and you feel defensive, ask yourself, what assumption am I protecting? When you hesitate to pursue a goal, ask what assumption is telling me this is not possible. When you judge someone without knowing their story, ask what assumption is shaping my perception. These small moments of inquiry can reveal the mental scripts you have been running without conscious input. But awareness alone is not enough. Once you identify an assumption, you must investigate it as if you were a detective examining a lead. Where did it come from? Is it based on your direct experience, or did you inherit it from someone else's story? Does it apply universally, or only in certain contexts? What evidence supports it, and what evidence contradicts it? This process is not about dismissing everything you believe. It is about ensuring that what remains is tested, solid, and truly yours. An example makes this concrete. Imagine someone who believes they are not good at math. This belief may have started in childhood, after a few poor grades or a teacher's comment. Over time, it becomes an assumption that feels like fact. Because of it, they avoid careers that require math. They shy away from opportunities involving data or finance, and they miss chances to develop skills that could serve them. But if they pause to question this assumption, to ask whether it is truly a fixed reality or simply a story they accepted, they might discover that with different teaching methods, more patience and deliberate practice, they are capable of more than they thought. The assumption was never a fact. It was a conclusion drawn too soon. Assumptions also shape how we interpret other people's behavior. If you assume people are generally selfish, you will notice selfishness everywhere and miss acts of generosity. If you assume strangers are dangerous, you will treat them with suspicion and possibly invite defensiveness in return. If you assume criticism is always an attack, you will resist feedback even when it could help you grow. Each of these assumptions becomes a filter, and the filter determines what you see. By questioning the filter, you expand the range of possibilities that reality can offer. One of the most liberating realizations is that an assumption is not the same as the truth. Truth is what exists independent of your belief in it. Assumptions are the guesses, generalizations, and mental shortcuts your mind uses to fill in the gaps when you do not have all the information. They can be useful. Life would be paralyzing if we questioned every single thing. But they must be tested regularly to ensure they are still accurate. If you carry assumptions like outdated maps, you will keep getting lost even while thinking you know exactly where you are going. It is also important to recognize that assumptions are often tied to identity. If you have built part of your self-image around being a practical person, or a realist, or dreamer, you may unconsciously reject any information that challenges that identity. This is why questioning assumptions can feel threatening. You are not just questioning an idea. You are questioning who you think you are. But identities can evolve, and the strongest ones are built on flexibility rather than rigidity. Challenging assumptions is not about becoming cynical or distrusting everything. It is about replacing blind acceptance with conscious choice. It is about saying, I will not simply inherit my beliefs. I will test them. I will choose them. This mindset turns you into an active participant in your own mental life, rather than a passive recipient of other people's stories. It puts you in the driver's seat of your thinking, and with that position comes responsibility. Because once you see that many of your limits were imagined, you can no longer use them as excuses. There is a certain mental courage required here. Some assumptions fumble quickly under examination, but others are stubborn, reinforced by years of habit and supported by the comfort of familiarity. You may discover that an assumption you have held for decades has been quietly shaping every major decision you have made. Realizing this can bring a mix of liberation and grief. Liberation because you are no longer bound by it. Grief because you wonder what might have been different if you had questioned it sooner. The only answer is to start now, so that in the future, you look back with fewer what-ifs and more I'm glad I did's. To strengthen your ability to practice exposing yourself to unfamiliar environments and perspectives. Travel to places where the culture operates differently from yours. Read books by authors who challenge your worldview. Engage in conversations with people whose life experiences differ radically from your own. This is not to force agreement, but to expand your awareness of the range of possibilities that exist beyond your current assumptions. Each new perspective you encounter is like another tool in your mental toolkit, giving you more ways to understand and navigate the world. One powerful exercise is to pick a belief you hold strongly and deliberately argue the opposite side as convincingly as possible. This is not to weaken your stance, but to reveal its blind spots. When you can articulate the strongest case against your own belief, you not only understand it more deeply, but you also loosen the grip of the assumption that it is the only possible truth. This mending reflexivity is one of the hallmarks of a critical thinker. Assumptions often operate most strongly in areas where we feel the most certainty. If you are absolutely sure that something is a certain way, pause and consider the possibility that your certainty might be a sign of an unexamined assumption. Certainty is comforting, but it can also be blinding. The willingness to live with a degree of uncertainty, to hold ideas loosely enough to adjust them when new evidence appears, is a sign of intellectual maturity. The mind that questions assumptions is not a mind without structure. It is a mind with stronger foundations. It is like a builder who inspects the ground before laying bricks, ensuring that the structure will stand the test of time. Every time you test an assumption and either confirm or replace it with a stronger one, you strengthen the integrity of your thinking. This process may never be complete, and that is the point. The goal is not to arrive at a fix, but to develop a habit of mental vigilance that keeps your thinking alive, adaptable, and grounded in reality. When you live this way, you stop accepting the limits that others hand to you. You stop saying, "That's just the way things are," and start asking, "Is that actually true? Is that the only way? What would happen if I did it differently?" These questions may not always lead to dramatic changes, but they create a life that is consciously chosen rather than unconsciously inherited. They create a mind that is free enough to explore, strong enough to adapt, and wise enough to know that no single perspective can capture the full truth. When you hear the phrase, analytical skills, it might sound like something reserved for mathematicians, scientists, or detectives. You might picture someone surrounded by charts, graphs, and complex formulas, working through problems that seem distant from everyday life. But the truth is that analytical skills are not just for specialists. They are essential tools for navigating nearly every decision you face, from personal choices to professional strategies. To master analytical thinking is to sharpen your ability to see patterns, break down complexity, and move toward clarity when others feel lost in confusion. At its core, analytical thinking is about learning to see beyond the surface. Life constantly presents us with situations that appear one way on the outside, but contain layers of causes, influences, and hidden factors beneath. The person with strong analytical skills has the patience and discipline to peel back those layers, to ask the right questions, and to organize information in a way that reveals the underlying truth. This is not simply an intellectual exercise. It is a practical advantage in every field, from business to relationships to problem solving in daily life. The first step in mastering analytical skills is understanding that information alone is not enough. We live in an age where information is everywhere, in books, videos, podcasts, and endless streams of content online. But having access to information is not the same as knowing how to interpret it. Two people can look at the same set of facts and draw completely different conclusions. The difference lies in how they process the data, what they pay attention to, and how they connect the dots. Analytical thinking is the bridge between raw information and meaningful insight. To develop this bridge, you must cultivate the habit of breaking problems down into their parts. When you encounter a challenge, resist the temptation to react based on your first impression. Instead, slow down and ask, what is the actual problem here? What are its components? What factors are influencing it? What are the possible causes? Just as a mechanic takes apart an engine to understand why it is not working, you must learn to disassemble problems to see what is happening inside. This requires awareness to question your own assumptions, a skill you have already begun building. Because your first interpretation of a situation is often shaped by bias, emotion, or incomplete information, analytical thinking asks you to step back from that first reaction and examine the evidence. If a project at work fails, is it really because of one person's mistake, or were there deeper issues in planning, communication, or resources? If a personal goal feels out of reach, is the barrier truly lack of ability, or is it a mismatch of strategy, timing, or environment? By breaking problems down in this way, you move from vague frustration to actionable clarity. Pattern recognition is another cornerstone of analytical skill. The more you train yourself to look for recurring themes, the more you can anticipate outcomes before they happen. In business, this might mean noticing that certain marketing approaches consistently lead to better customer engagement. In relationships, it might mean recognizing that certain types of conversations tend to escalate into conflict, allowing you to address them differently in the future. Patterns reveal themselves only to those who are paying close attention, and attention is a skill in itself. It requires you to slow down, to observe carefully, and to record what you see rather than letting it pass by unnoticed. A practical way to strengthen this ability is to keep a pattern journal. Whenever you notice something repeating, in your habits, in the behavior of others, in market trends, in the way events unfold, write it down. Over time, you will begin to see connections that others miss. What once looked like random noise will start to resemble a map, and that map will give you an edge in making decisions. Analytical thinking also demands the ability to compare and contrast. When faced with options, the analytical mind does not simply choose the one that feels most comfortable. It lays the options side by side, evaluates their strengths and weaknesses, and measures them against clear criteria. This prevents you from being swayed by surface appeal or momentary emotion. For example, when deciding between two job offers, you might list factors like salary, growth opportunities, work culture, location, and alignment with your long-term goals. By rating each option across these dimensions, you move from an emotional guess to an evidence-based choice. It is equally important to learn how to spot weak points in your own reasoning. Humans have a natural tendency toward cognitive biases, mental shortcuts that can distort our judgment. Confirmation bias leads us to favor information that supports our existing beliefs. Availability bias makes us overestimate the likelihood of events that are easy to remember. The analytical thinker is not immune to these biases, but they are aware of them and take steps to counteract their influence. This might mean deliberately seeking out opposing viewpoints, testing your ideas with others, or running through what-if scenarios to challenge your assumptions. Numbers and data play a critical role in analysis, but analytical skill is not about drowning in spreadsheets. It is about knowing what data to collect, how to interpret it, and when to balance it with qualitative insights. For example, if you are evaluating customer satisfaction, you might look at numerical ratings, but you also pay attention to written feedback, tone of communication, and patterns in complaints. Numbers can tell you what is happening, but they often need context to explain why it is happening. One of the most powerful tools for analytical thinking is the concept of root cause analysis. Too often, we treat symptoms instead of addressing the underlying cause of a problem. If a plant in your garden is dying, you can replace the leaves or water it more often, but unless you discover that the soil is depleted or the roots are damaged, the problem will persist. In the same way, if a team is underperforming, you can increase training or motivation, but if the root cause is unclear goals or poor leadership, the symptoms will continue. Learning to dig until you find the root cause is a discipline that can save time, resources, and frustration. To practice this, use the 5 whys technique. Ask why repeatedly, often 5 times, until you uncover the deeper cause. For example, why was the project late? Because we underestimated the time needed. Why? Because we didn't account for potential delays. Why? Because our planning process doesn't include risk assessments. Why? Because we've never created a formal risk checklist. Why? Because we assumed past timelines would always apply. This process reveals where to make meaningful changes rather than patching surface issues. Collaboration is another often overlooked aspect of analytical thinking. While analysis can be a solitary activity, it is greatly enriched by diverse perspectives. A single person can only see so much. Bringing together people with different expertise, experiences, and thinking styles can illuminate blind spots and uncover angles you might have missed. The key is to approach collaboration not as a competition for whose idea is best, but as a collective search for the most accurate understanding. This requires listening as much as speaking, asking clarifying questions, and being willing to change your mind when better evidence appears. There is also an emotional side to analytical thinking that is often underestimated. Staying calm under pressure allows you to think clearly when others are overwhelmed. When emotions run high, in a crisis, a negotiation, or a heated disagreement, the analytical mind maintains enough detachment to see the situation objectively. This does not mean ignoring feeling. It means acknowledging them while keeping them from hijacking the reasoning process. Emotional discipline is the quiet partner of clear thinking. Technology can be both a help and a hindrance in developing analytical skills. On one hand, tools for data visualization, project management, and research make it easier than ever to gather and interpret information. On the other hand, over-reliance on technology can weaken your ability to think critically without it. True mastery involves using tools to enhance your thinking, not replace it. This means double-checking automated results, questioning algorithms, and ensuring that human judgment remains at the center of decision-making. Practicing analytical skills can and should happen daily. Every decision, from how you structure your day to how you respond to unexpected challenges, is an opportunity to apply these principles. The more you practice, the more natural it becomes to pause, gather information, identify patterns, and act with clarity over time. This way of thinking becomes less of a deliberate process and more of an instinct that sets you apart in a world where quick reactions are often valued over thoughtful responses. The art of synthesis is the bridge between analysis and action. If analysis is about breaking things apart to understand their components, synthesis is about putting them back together in a way that creates something new, more powerful, and more meaningful than the sum of its parts. Many people spend their lives learning how to dissect problems, gather facts, and separate detail, yet they struggle to combine those elements into a coherent whole that leads to real solutions. Synthesis is not just the act of combining. It is the act of integrating insights, perspectives, and information into a unified vision that can drive progress. In our world today, information is scattered. You can find pieces of knowledge everywhere, in books, in conversations, in online articles, in personal experiences. Each fragment has value, but only when you can connect them into patterns and frameworks does that value multiply. The mind trained in synthesis does not merely collect facts. It organizes them, links them, and discovers relationships that others overlook. This is why synthesis is often the mark of leadership. Leaders are rarely the ones who know every detail. They are the ones who can take different streams of thought, combine them, and present a clear path forward. To master synthesis, you must first train yourself to see connections between ideas that, on the surface, seem unrelated. The human brain loves category. We like to put things in neat boxes. Science here, art there, business over here, personal life somewhere else. But reality does not operate in boxes. Nature, innovation, and human behavior are all interconnected. A scientist may find inspiration for a breakthrough by studying art. A business strategist may solve a problem by applying principles from sports psychology. An architect may design a building based on patterns found in seashells. Synthesis thrives when you let go of rigid divisions and allow ideas from one field to enrich another. This ability often begins with curiosity. When you are curious, you naturally explore beyond your current field of knowledge. You read widely, listen to different perspectives, and expose yourself to varied experiences. The more diverse the sources you draw from, the more raw material your mind has to work with during synthesis. This is why some of the most creative solutions come from people who have lived in multiple countries, studied in different disciplines, or worked in a variety of industries. Each environment adds a unique set of mental tools to their repertoire, making them better at combining ideas in original ways. Synthesis also requires you to filter. Not every piece of information is useful, and not every idea belongs in the final picture. A skilled synthesizer knows how to separate noise from signal. This filtering is not about discarding ideas too quickly, but about recognizing which ones contribute to the overall purpose. Imagine creating a mosaic. You may have thousands of tiles in different shapes and colors, but only certain ones will fit into the specific image you are building. Synthesis is the process of arranging those tiles until the full image emerges. One of the greatest challenges in synthesis is overcoming the paralysis of complexity. When faced with too much information, many people freeze. They do not know where to start or which pieces to prioritize. The key here is to focus on the central question or objective. Every piece of information should be evaluated in light of that central purpose. Ask yourself, does this piece move me closer to my goal? Does it clarify the problem or solution? If it does, keep it. If it doesn't, set it aside. Not because it has no value, but because it does not serve the current synthesis. A practical way to train synthesis is through summarization. When you read a complex article, watch a documentary, or attend a meeting, challenge yourself to distill it into 3 core takeaways. Then take those takeaways and see how they connect to what you already know. Over time, this habit strengthens your ability to merge new insights with existing frameworks, which is the foundation of synthesis. Synthesis is also about creating meaning, and meaning is deeply personal. 2 people can be presented with the same information and synthesize it into entirely different conclusions based on their values, experiences, and perspectives. This is why diversity in teams is so valuable. The same raw material can produce multiple innovative solutions when filtered through different minds. When you engage in synthesis, you are not only combining ideas, you are shaping them through the lens of your unique worldview. That personal element is what makes your contribution distinct. One of the most powerful expressions of synthesis is storytelling. A great storyteller does not simply relay events. They select the most important elements, arrange them in a compelling sequence, and connect them in a way that conveys a deeper message. In the same way, when you synthesize ideas, you are creating a narrative, a coherent explanation of how things fit together and why they matter. This narrative can inspire action, persuade others, and guide decisions in a way that isolated facts never could. In the professional world, synthesis often takes the form of strategy. A strategist gathers data from market trends, customer behavior, competitor actions, and internal resources, then combines them into a plan that positions the organization for success. In personal growth, synthesis might involve integrating lessons from failures, advice from mentors, and self-reflection into a new approach to living. In both cases, the value of synthesis lies in its ability to take scattered experiences and turn them into a clear direction forward. One trap to avoid in synthesis is forcing connections that are not there. True synthesis is based on genuine relationships between ideas, not on superficial similarities. It is easy to draw parallels where none exist, or to create a false sense of coherence. This happens when you become attached to a particular conclusion and try to fit every piece of information into it. Even if it does not belong, the disciplined synthesizer remains open to the possibility that the connections they find may lead to unexpected outcomes. This openness allows for creativity without sacrificing accuracy. An essential skill in synthesis is knowing when the picture is complete enough to act. Perfectionism can be the enemy here. You could spend forever gathering more information, refining connections, and adjusting frameworks, But at some point, you must move from thinking to doing. The best synthesizers understand that synthesis is an ongoing process. You start with the best combination you can form with what you have, then refine it as new information comes in. This flexibility ensures that your synthesis stays relevant in a changing world. The art of synthesis also has an emotional dimension. It requires the confidence to trust your ability to bring disparate pieces together, and the humility to revise your conclusions when better connections emerge. It is a dance between decisiveness and openness, between clarity and adaptability. Those who master this balance become invaluable in any environment, because they can both make sense of the present and adjust to the future. Every time you synthesize well, you are training your mind to see the world in a more integrated way. You stop viewing knowledge as a collection of separate compartments and start experiencing it as an interconnected web. Problems stop appearing as isolated puzzles and start revealing themselves as part of a larger system. This shift in perception changes how you approach challenges, how you learn, and how you innovate. In a world flooded with disconnected information, the ability to synthesize is not just useful, it is essential. It allows you to turn confusion into clarity, chaos into order, and scattered efforts into focused action. It is the skill that transforms analysis into vision and vision into reality, ensuring that the time you spend understanding is not wasted, but becomes the foundation for purposeful, impactful movement forward. Emotional intelligence and critical thinking may seem like separate worlds, one grounded in feelings and human connection, the other in logic and analysis, but the reality is they are deeply intertwined. The mind cannot operate at its full potential without the heart, and the heart cannot guide effectively without the mind. Many people have been taught to treat emotions as an obstacle to rational thought, as if the two are in constant conflict, yet history and human experience show that emotions are not the enemy of reason. They are its partner. The key is not to silence emotions, but to understand them, manage them, and integrate them into the decision-making process in a way that strengthens, rather than weakens, our clarity. Emotional intelligence begins with self-awareness, the ability to recognize what you are feeling in the moment and why you are feeling it. Without this awareness, emotions can take control of your reasoning without your realizing it. Anger can make you dismiss facts you would otherwise consider. Fear can keep you from taking opportunities that logic tells you are sound. Overconfidence can blind you to risks that are clearly present. When you can identify the emotional currents running beneath your thoughts, you are in a position to decide whether they are helping or hindering your judgment. Self-awareness is like having a dashboard for your inner state. It lets you monitor your emotional responses in real time so they do not steer you off course without your consent. Yet awareness alone is not enough. Emotional intelligence also demands self-regulation, the ability to manage your emotional responses so they remain aligned with your goals and values. This does not mean suppressing emotions or pretending not to feel them. It means pausing before reacting, choosing responses deliberately rather than impulsively, and ensuring that your actions serve the larger purpose, rather than the temporary feeling. Imagine being in a heated discussion where someone challenges your ideas. Without self-regulation, you might react defensively, undermining your credibility. With it, you can pause, listen, and respond in a way that addresses the challenge with reason and composure, increasing both your influence and the quality of the exchange. Emotions are powerful motivators. They influence what we pay attention to and how we interpret information. This is why emotional intelligence is not just about self-control, but about using emotions as data. If you feel uneasy about a decision that seems logically sound, that feeling may be pointing to a detail you have overlooked. If you feel excitement about a possibility, That energy can fuel the persistence needed to turn an idea into reality. By listening to emotions without becoming enslaved by them, you gain an extra layer of insight that purely logical thinking can miss. Beyond self-awareness and self-regulation, emotional intelligence extends into empathy, the ability to understand and share the feelings of others. Critical thinking is often seen as a solitary skill, something you do in the privacy of your own mind, but in reality, it thrives in collaboration. To think critically in a group setting, you must be able to grasp not just the facts others present, but the emotions and motivations behind those facts. People rarely express their reasoning in purely logical terms. They frame their arguments in ways that reflect their personal concerns, values, and fears. Without empathy, you may misinterpret their meaning or miss the deeper issues driving their perspective. Empathy is also a strategic tool. When you understand what others care about, you can present your ideas in ways that resonate with them. This is not manipulation, it is alignment. You are taking the core truth of your message and framing it in a way that connects with the audience's emotional reality. A proposal for change in a workplace, for example, will land differently with someone who fears job loss than with someone eager for innovation. The facts may be the same, but the way you deliver them should take those emotional contexts into account. Social skills, another component of emotional intelligence, amplify the power of empathy. Social skills involve communicating effectively, building trust, and managing relationships so that dialogue remains productive even when disagreements arise. Critical thinking often involves challenging assumptions and pointing out flaws in reasoning, which can create tension if not handled with care. Strong social skills allow you to raise these points without alienating others, preserving collaboration while pursuing clarity. The person who can navigate difficult conversations without escalating conflict becomes a valuable asset in any team or organization. Emotional intelligence also influences the way you handle uncertainty, a constant companion in critical thinking. Logical analysis can help you identify probable outcomes, but uncertainty always leaves room for doubt, and doubt often triggers anxiety. The emotionally intelligent thinker recognizes this and develops resilience, the capacity to stay engaged and focused even when the path forward is not entirely clear. Resilience is fueled by optimism, not the naive belief that everything will turn out perfectly, but the confidence that you can adapt and respond effectively to whatever challenges arise. This mindset keeps you moving forward when others get stuck in hesitation. Another intersection between emotional intelligence and critical thinking lies in the ability to recognize cognitive biases. Many biases are rooted in emotion. Confirmation bias, for instance, often springs from the comfort of having our existing beliefs reinforced. Loss aversion is tied to the fear of regret. Groupthink is driven by the desire for belonging and the avoidance of conflict. By developing emotional intelligence, you can spot these emotional triggers more quickly, which makes it easier to step back and evaluate situations objectively. There is also a creative dimension to emotional intelligence in critical thinking. Creativity often emerges from emotional engagement. The desire to solve a problem that matters to you, the excitement of exploring a new idea, or the frustration of wanting a better way. Emotions give you the energy to push through the discomfort of uncertainty that comes with creative problem solving. When you connect your logical analysis to your emotional investment, you create solutions that are not only smart but deeply meaningful. This integration of head and heart is especially important in leadership. A leader who relies solely on logic may make technically correct decisions that fail because they ignore the emotional realities of those affected. A leader who relies solely on emotion may make decisions that feel good in the moment, but collapse under scrutiny. The leader who combines both can craft strategies that are logically sound, emotionally resonant, and practically effective. They can inspire trust, mobilize teams, and adapt to changing circumstances without losing sight of the vision. In personal life, emotional intelligence in critical thinking shapes the quality of your relationships. Disagreements with friends, family, or partners are inevitable. The emotionally intelligent thinker approaches these moments not with the goal of winning the argument, but with the goal of understanding the other person's perspective and finding a solution that respects both sides. This does not mean abandoning your own reasoning, but it does mean recognizing that human connection often matters more than proving you are right. By blending logic with compassion, you strengthen relationships instead of eroding them in the heat of conflict. Developing emotional intelligence is an ongoing process, much like developing critical thinking itself. It begins with intentional reflection. Throughout your day, pause to notice your emotional state. Ask yourself what triggered it, how it is influencing your thinking, and whether it is aligned with your goals. Practice active listening in conversations, focusing not only on the words being spoken, but also on the tone, body language, and emotions behind them. Pay attention to how others react to your communication, and adjust your approach to keep interactions constructive. It is also worth practicing emotional detachment in analysis without losing empathy. This means being able to step back from your own emotional investment in an idea so you can evaluate it objectively. Detachment does not mean disinterest. It means creating enough space between your feelings and your reasoning that neither one overwhelms the other. This balance is what allows you to revise your conclusions when new evidence emerges, rather than clinging to them out of pride or fear. The connection between emotional intelligence and critical thinking is not just theoretical. It plays out in every decision, every interaction, and every challenge you face. When you recognize and harness your emotions, you do not lose rationality, you expand it. Your thinking becomes more nuanced, your decisions more grounded, and your actions more impactful. You begin to see people not as obstacles to be persuaded, but as partners in a shared search for truth and progress. This shift transforms not only how you think, but how you lead, collaborate, and live. The greatest obstacles to clear and powerful thinking often do not come from the complexity we face, but from the barriers we carry within our own minds. These barriers are invisible to the untrained eye, but they shape every decision, every perception, and every action. They are not just limitations, they are filters coloring the way we interpret reality. The most successful thinkers, innovators, and leaders are not necessarily the ones with the highest IQ or the most education, but the ones who learn how to identify and dismantle these barriers so their potential can move freely. Breaking these mental walls is not a single event, it is a lifelong discipline that demands awareness, courage, and practice. The first barrier that often appears is the comfort of certainty. Humans are naturally drawn to what is familiar because it feels safe. Certainty gives a sense of control in a chaotic world, yet it can also become a prison. When you cling too tightly to what you already know, you shut the door to what you could learn. New ideas that challenge your beliefs feel threatening instead of enlightening. You may disenlighten your position, not because it lacks merit, but because accepting it would require you to change your mental framework. The way to overcome this is to deliberately step into the discomfort of uncertainty. Seek out perspectives that oppose yours. Ask questions that you do not know the answer to, not just to confirm your position, but to understand the full scope of the issue. Another barrier is the fear of failure, a powerful force that stops countless people from attempting the very things that could transform their lives. Fear of failure often disguises itself as caution, procrastination, or endless preparation. You may tell yourself you are waiting for the right time, But the truth is you are waiting for a guarantee that does not exist. This fear is rooted in the belief that mistakes define your worth, when in reality mistakes are simply data. They are feedback from the world, telling you what works and what doesn't. The most resilient minds view failure as a necessary step towards success, not an endpoint. Every failed attempt carries the seeds of understanding that cannot be gained through theory alone. Closely tied to fear of failure is the barrier of perfectionism. Perfectionism convinces you that nothing you produce is ever good enough, that every action must be flawless before it can be shared with the world. This mindset paralyzes progress because it turns every decision into an impossible standard. In truth, progress is iterative. Every masterpiece, every breakthrough, every innovation was born through a messy process of trial and adjustment. Releasing the need for perfection opens the door to experimentation, and experimentation is the oxygen of critical thinking. The aim should be excellence, not flawlessness. To produce something better today than you did yesterday, and then to improve tomorrow. Another mental barrier is the voice of self-doubt. This is the internal narrative that whispers you are not capable enough, experienced enough, or deserving enough to reach your goals. Self-doubt can be a survival instinct in disguise, a relic from a time when standing out from the group carried real danger. But in the modern world, this instinct often holds you back more than it protects you. Overcoming self-doubt requires both evidence and action. Evidence comes from looking back at your life and recognizing the moments when you succeeded despite uncertainty. Action comes from taking steps forward before you feel ready, because readiness is often the result of doing, not the prerequisite for it. The barrier of mental inertia is subtle, but just as limiting. It is the tendency to keep doing things the way you have always done them, even when the circumstances have changed. Inertia is comfortable, because it requires no new investment of energy. But the world does not stand, and neither should your thinking. Just as muscles weaken without use, mental flexibility challenge. To break inertia, you must practice re-evaluating your habits, beliefs, and processes on a regular basis. Ask yourself, if I were starting fresh today, knowing what I now know, would I still choose to do it this way? If the answer is no, then change is not only possible but necessary. Another barrier is the illusion of multitasking. Many pride themselves on their ability to juggle multiple tasks at once, believing it shows efficiency. In reality, multitasking often leads to shallow thinking, fragmented focus, and diminished creativity. The brain is not designed to process multiple, idle tasks simultaneously. What we call multitasking is often rapid switching between tasks, which drains mental energy and increases the likelihood of errors. Deep, critical thought requires periods of undivided attention, where your mental resources can fully engage with a single problem. Overcoming this barrier means reclaiming the discipline of focus in a world that constantly demands your attention. The barrier of limited perspective can be one of the most dangerous, because it is often invisible to the person who has it. You see the world through the lens of your experiences, culture, education, and personal history. This lens shapes what you notice and what you ignore. Without awareness, you may assume your view is complete when it is only partial. Overcoming this barrier requires active exposure to new experiences and diverse voices. Read books outside your usual interests. Engage with people whose backgrounds are different from yours. Travel, if possible, to places that challenge your assumptions. Each new perspective you encounter adds another piece to the puzzle of understanding, and the more pieces you have, the clearer the picture becomes. Another subtle barrier is emotional attachment to ideas. You may have invested years defending a particular belief or approach, making it part of your identity. Letting go of it feels like losing part of yourself. This attachment can blind you to new evidence or better solutions. The key is to shift your loyalty from the idea itself to the pursuit of truth. When your identity is anchored in being a learner rather than being right, you can adjust your views without feeling diminished. This flexibility not only strengthens your thinking, but also earns you the respect of others who value intellectual honesty. One of the most persistent barriers is the influence of societal and cultural conditioning. From a young age, you are taught what is acceptable to think, what is safe to question, and what paths are worth pursuing. These messages can be so deeply ingrained that you mistake them for your own beliefs. Critical thinking requires the courage to examine these inherited assumptions and decide for yourself whether they serve your values and goals. This does not mean rejecting every tradition or norm, but it does mean taking ownership of your own mind. True independence of thought is not about being different for the sake of difference, but about thinking deeply enough to choose your own course. There is also the barrier of information overload. In today's world, you have access to more data than any generation before you. Yet this abundance can become overwhelming. When you are bombarded with constant input, it becomes difficult to separate signal from noise. This can lead to decision fatigue, where the sheer volume of options and opinions leaves you paralyzed. The solution is to develop systems for filtering information, prioritizing quality over quantity, seeking sources you trust, and deliberately limiting your intake when you need to focus. Mental clarity is not just about what you know, but about what you choose to ignore. The barrier of comparison can erode confidence and distort priorities. When you measure your progress against the highlight reels of others, you may undervalue your own path or abandon it entirely. Comparison can push you to chase goals that look impressive but hold little meaning for you. To overcome this, you must ground your sense of achievement in your own values. And, it is measured not by how far ahead or behind you are relative to others, but by how far you have come relative to where you started. Overcoming mental barriers is not simply a matter of willpower. It is about creating an environment, both internal and external, that supports growth. Internally, this means cultivating habits of reflection, curiosity, and resilience. Externally, it means surrounding yourself with people who challenge you to flee, who encourage exploration rather than conformity, and who model the kind of thinking you aspire to develop. Growth is rarely comfortable, and that discomfort is often the signal that you are moving beyond the limits you once accepted. When you begin dismantling these barriers, the shift is profound. You start to see opportunities where you once saw dead ends. Problems that seemed insurmountable become solvable because you are no longer fighting them with one hand tied by your own limitations. Your thinking becomes more fluid, more adaptive, more capable of navigating complexity. And with each barrier you break, you gain not only a clearer mind, but also a stronger sense of agency. The recognition that you are not merely a passenger in your own life, but the one steering the course. The journey of critical thinking does not have a finish line. It is not a skill you master once and store away like a completed certificate. It is a living process, shaped and reshaped by every experience, every challenge, every question you dare to ask. Just as a river is never the same from one moment to the next, your thinking evolves with the flow of life. The world you navigate today is not the same world you stepped into yesterday, and the world tomorrow will be different still. In such an environment, stagnation is not just a missed opportunity, it is a slow erosion of your ability to adapt. Growth in critical thinking is a commitment to continual renewal, a choice to remain a student, no matter how much you have learned. There is a deep temptation to believe that once you have reached a certain level of understanding, you have arrived. You may look back on your past and see how much you have grown, how much more capable you are today, and feel a quiet satisfaction. That satisfaction is deserved, but it can also be dangerous. It can lure you into thinking that the hard work is behind you. In reality, the higher you climb, the more expansive the view becomes, revealing horizons you could not even see before. Each new level of insight exposes complexities that challenge you anew, and each challenge demands a deeper refinement of your reasoning. The mind, like any muscle, responds to the demands placed upon it. When you feed it a steady diet of easy answers, it weakens. When you stretch it with problems that resist simple solutions, it grows sharper and more resilient. This is why the journey must be intentional. It is not enough to wait for challenges to find you. You must seek them out. Read books that are beyond your current level of understanding and wrestle with their ideas until they yield clarity. Engage in conversations with people who think differently, not to convert them to your view, but to learn the contours of their reasoning. Take on projects that require skills you do not yet have, forcing your mind to build new pathways to meet the demand. One of the richest sources of growth in critical thinking comes from reflection. The fast pace of modern life pushes you to move quickly from one task to the next, from one decision to another, but without deliberate reflection, the lessons of experience can pass you by unnoticed. Reflection is the act of stepping back to observe your own thinking, to examine the assumptions you carried into a decision, the biases that may have colored your perception, the patterns that shaped your conclusions. It is not about judging yourself harshly, but about refining your awareness so that the next time you face a similar challenge, your mind is better. Reflection is also the bridge between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is the accumulation of facts, ideas, and methods. Wisdom is the ability to apply them with discernment. You can memorize principles of logic, study the great thinkers of history, and learn frameworks for decision-making, but without the habit of reflection, these tools remain unused potential. By pausing to analyze not only what you thought but how you thought, you begin to see the architecture of your own mind. Its strengths, its blind spots, its unique ways of connecting ideas. This self-awareness is the foundation on which the lifelong journey rests. In this journey, adaptability becomes as important as accuracy. The more you grow in your thinking, the more you realize that certainty is often temporary. What seems unquestionably true today may need to be revised tomorrow in light of new evidence. This is not a sign of weakness or instability. It is the hallmark of intellectual maturity. The rigid mind breaks under the weight of change, while the flexible mind bends, adjusts, and continues forward. The willingness to update your views is not about being fickle, but about staying aligned with truth as it unfolds. The path of lifelong critical thinking also requires the discipline to question not just external information, but internal impulses. Emotions are a powerful part of human decision-making, and they can either illuminate or distort your reasoning. Anger can sharpen your focus on injustice, but also narrow your perspective to a single point. Excitement can fuel innovation, but also blind you to potential risks. By developing the habit of noticing your emotional state and its influence on your thinking, you give yourself the power to pause, to examine whether your current conclusion is the product of balanced reasoning or a surge of feeling. This awareness extends beyond your own mind to the systems and structures you inhabit. The environment you live in, social, cultural, technological, shapes your thinking in ways you may not always perceive. Part of the lifelong journey is learning to see the invisible forces at work around you, from the subtle cues in language that frame a debate to the algorithms that decide which information you encounter online. Recognizing these influences allows you to navigate them with greater autonomy, choosing which to accept, which to challenge, and which to ignore. Another dimension of the journey is humility. The deeper you go into the practice of critical thinking, the more you realize the vastness of what you do not know. Humility is not about lowering your sense of worth, but about holding your conclusions lightly enough to let them be reshaped. It is the recognition that no single person, no matter how intelligent or experienced, can see the whole picture. Humility keeps you curious, keeps you asking questions, keeps you listening when it would be easier to speak. Without it, growth stops, because you become too invested in defending your image of being right rather than in pursuing what is true. The lifelong journey also thrives on intentional exposure to complexity. In a world that rewards speed and simplicity, it is tempting to avoid complexity in favor of quick conclusions. But complex problems are the training ground for advanced thinking. They force you to hold multiple variables in mind, to consider competing values, to navigate uncertainty without rushing to closure. The more you engage with complexity, the more comfortable you become in ambiguity, and the more skilled you become at finding clarity without oversimplifying reality. The process is not always comfortable. There will be times when the pursuit of deeper understanding disrupts the stability of your beliefs, when the questions you ask lead you into territory that feels uncertain or even unsettling. This discomfort is not a sign that you are lost. It is a sign that you are growing. Growth often feels like instability in the moment, because it is the dismantling of an old framework to make space for a more expansive one. The key is to trust the process, to keep moving, keep questioning, keep refining. One of the most empowering aspects of this journey is the compounding effect of small, consistent effort. Just as physical strength is built through repeated exercises over time, mental strength is built through regular engagement with ideas, challenges, and reflection. Reading a single book may shift your perspective slightly. Reading consistently over years reshapes the very architecture of your thinking. Practicing logical reasoning on small decisions may seem insignificant. Over time, it creates a natural habit of clarity that influences even the most complex choices. The accumulation of these efforts is often invisible in the moment, but undeniable over the long arc of your life. There is also a deeply human element to the lifelong pursuit of critical thinking. It is not an isolated journey taken in solitude, but one enriched through community. Engaging with others who are also committed to growth multiplies your learning. In conversation, you encounter ideas you might never have considered alone. In debate, you sharpen your reasoning against the resistance of another perspective. In collaboration, you see how different ways of thinking can merge to create solutions none could have achieved individually. This is why it is vital to seek out not just like-minded individuals, but also those who challenge you, who provoke you to refine and expand your view. As you move through this journey, you will find that critical thinking becomes less about arriving at a fixed truth and more about cultivating a way of being. A mindset that is alert, curious, and responsive. It is the posture of someone who is both grounded in their values and open to growth, who can navigate the shifting landscapes of life with both confidence and adaptability. This way of being does not just improve your decisions, it transforms the way you engage with the world. You become less reactive and more deliberate, less swayed by the noise of the moment, and more anchored in the pursuit of lasting understanding. The beauty of this journey is that there is no endpoint where learning stops, because life itself keeps presenting new terrain to explore. Every stage of life brings fresh questions, fresh challenges, and fresh opportunities to refine your thinking. The skills you develop in one season prepare you for the complexities of the next, and the lessons you learn in later years bring new depth to the experiences of your past. Each moment becomes part of a larger mosaic, each insight a piece that connects with the others to form a richer, more intricate picture of the world and your place in it. The lifelong journey of critical thinking is both a personal path and a contribution to something larger. As you grow, you not only improve your own decisions and enrich your own life, you also influence those around you. The clarity, curiosity, and resilience you develop become a source of inspiration and guidance for others. Your way of thinking can ripple outward, shaping conversations and even the culture of the spaces you inhabit. In this way, the journey is both inward and outward, a continual expansion that benefits not only yourself, but the world you touch.